found in class guitar education that's been missing really is the ability to connect with students on an individual level and their need basis and what it might be outside the classroom. So
Mhm.
I've been working a lot with technology to enhance that education process with the students. And the way that has worked for me here at the University of Louisville with our guitar classes, along with my fantastic teaching assistants who do such great work with those classes, we've managed to one of the buzzwords now would be to flip the classroom, where we put a lot of content online via video. Quite simply, we just record every single in-person class meeting and make that available online through our platform is Blackboard that we use. So we record all of those, and then the class is there for the students to go back and review in an asynchronous way. And then we also provide content of video tutorials that are there for them in course content. And some of that is as simple as showing a closer view of how to make a particular chord shape or chord voicing, to show them a strumming pattern or arpeggio technique that we're working on. And the students can go back and review that on their own time and view it multiple times if they need to. That's been great for the students. I think also it's been very beneficial for assessment in class guitar. I've begun using Panopto, which is a video software that allows the students to upload videos to Blackboard, and I can then go in and make comments on their video performance, and it's time marked,
Timestamps,
so
yeah.
it's specific to that particular moment in time when they play, and I can say something like, "You were supposed to use your second finger here,"
Mhm.
and it will go straight to the point in the video and they can see and make that correction. So that's something that I think was generally lost in traditional class guitar settings and has been much improved now. And those are just a couple of things that come about off the top of my head. But
And it really
what
changes the economic, like, air quotes here, the economics of things too, because I'm thinking as well, I can make a tutorial video for all 24 scales, do it
hmm
once, and now I have this catalog for it, or this can be,
hmm
we didn't, I guess I'll just say it now. It's just like one of the other projects that the Louisville Guitar Society does, and another project that I facilitate is the No Middle School Guitar Club. And now, again, I'm thinking of, how do I multiply myself so I can be in more middle school? So we, again,
hmm
we can provide guitar instruction in an equitable way, because it's not all middle schools have a guitar specialist, or nor do they have a guitar class. So
hmm
moving in this direction, I'm thinking, yeah, just maybe just build this library of content and
right,
then just share this through Google Classroom in the future. So
right,
um, and it will never fully replace the teacher in the moment, like where you're saying, where you're giving a feedback video, or you're, putting in a timestamp comment. But it really, I don't know, it definitely inspires a lot of like bigger, larger thinking, than just just being in the physical classroom.
that's true. That's true. And I think then it just to kind of state as well the obvious is that we are here online in an event hosted by etudes.co, and you have etudes.co in many organizations and online presence like it that have provided just invaluable resource for classroom teachers who one need to find content. I think one of the biggest gaps that's met there is that a site like etudes.co provides peer-reviewed and graded material for class guitar teachers or even studio guitar teachers. But I think most notably, we often have class guitar teachers coming to us as guitar specialists with the question, what is an appropriate piece for my student to play now? How would I progress that student through the various stages? What works would meet these state standards and so forth.
Hmm.
And I think that provides a great resource for such teachers who perhaps had a block of guitar class added to their schedule by their high school or middle school principal, and they had to quickly uh, gain some knowledge in what to do in those classes.
And that's something too that we can be resources for, or maybe this might be another interesting conversation to bookmark here, but looking at solo and ensemble requirements and then maybe setting up a module that has those pieces that are um, relevant to those standards. If they,
Mhm.
you know, if you're looking for a certain etude, we can have it, the graded etude, we can have like a progression of it so teachers can know which pieces are appropriate for their state assessments. Um, that might be an
Exactly.
interesting thing to kind of curate.
Right. And I know of projects that are underway with that. Many on the resources that we have available to us as class guitar teachers are very multifaceted. And one that I would say is a great resource to go to would be the NAFME Guitar uh, Council, and then also the Guitar Foundation of America with their best practices that they have available on their website. Those are at least places to start
Hmm.
and branch out from there. The Guitar Foundation of America has a link on their website to state standards. It's very easy to navigate. I was just showing that particular link to my guitar pedagogy students the other day. Um, that process, though, is one that you could speak to more, and something that I wanted to kind of lead our discussion toward a little bit, as well as um, the 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 impression that teaching class guitar is something that you are just inherently able to do as a guitarist. And it's so much more than that. And I think many guitarists learn that, those coming out of, say, a performance degree, who have spent many hours just really carefully shaping their craft on the instrument, but have not necessarily had the requisite experience in classroom management or lesson planning or group instruction and assessment. That there can be a very steep learning curve to that, and many of those skills are things that are learned in a music education degree. And something that I've noticed is that there is an increase in interest in guitar education, obviously at the K through 12 level, but I wonder to what extent that has uh, been met by interest in uh, new 4-year degree seeking students entering into music education as their chosen path for their undergraduate degree. I'm offering that as a question. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know that that has been
Yeah,
studied, but it's an
it
interesting question.
no, it's totally, this is something that I think we've I don't know, I'm remembering many of our conversations like this before, where it really is the great chicken or egg kind of question. Do we does the university have to decide that, oh, we kind of see this trend happening, we should get in front of it and provide a curriculum to satisfy a guitar music education kind of license? Or do the teachers kind of have to create this sort of critical mass where the university responds to it? Because when I did my music education degree, I did a vocal concentration, so I
Hmm.
was more equipped to teach choirs than oh, I mean, obviously I have my master's in guitar performance, but I didn't have a specific music ed background just for guitar pedagogy or guitar classroom pedagogy. That kind of had to happen in real time. And to your point, I did kind of feel like, although I did a Suzuki certification, and I had other, like, I was familiar with the Austin guitar curriculum as well as that too. I still think there's that kind of like leap of faith where I think that your first instincts say teach this like you're in a private studio lesson, and it just
Hmm.
doesn't work that way. And you really have to, the ensemble is the greatest gift that we can give classroom teachers, and having great resources for that I think is so valuable. So um, now this becomes an interesting question now, because here we are in the virtual world, and we don't, like, virtual ensembles are a little bit trickier. There's a whole nother learning curve to that as well. So feel free to steer the ship wherever you want to after that. What do you think's the next talking point from there, Steve.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the virtual guitar orchestra again and how we're doing that. I think the nuts and bolts of how that happened would be kind of interesting to some who are on the call that might not be familiar, or maybe they've seen the finished product and they're not aware what really went into making that happen. I'll just share that the point that I'm kind of learning these days is that um, I was just not quite satisfied with every single video I would find. There are many great videos out there online with instructions on how to change your strings on a classical guitar, right? And
Hmm.
there were just little details that I wanted to add to these, and I was just really often intimidated to even start because such great content was already there, and I would prefer to just add kind of a couple little details like, oh, this video refers to this string as the first string, and they mean the first string you're changing, not that it's the first string, it's actually the sixth string, some little thing like that in the wording. And so I started to make the video, had three different cameras set up, and a half hour later I was ready to start recording. It took a half hour just for setup, and then just trying to comport yourself to prepare for making a video like that is really difficult because I've, of course, changed guitar strings all my life, and I don't even think about it anymore. But then as I stop to try to express it in exactly the way I want to for a video that will be there for hopefully a while for students to watch year after year, I just was often at a loss for words or ended up tripping over the details, doing something, saying something out of order or whatever. So it takes it basically what I'm saying is it takes an incredible amount of time to first get the raw content, and then that has to be pieced together and edited. So for those of you who are out there looking for my video on how to change strings, it doesn't exist because I just I just scrapped the project for a second. And I said, what's already out there is way better than anything I can do right now. But you have done a bit of this. I have a couple of high school students who are in your program who have done a small duet, and I put them side by side in a
Uh-huh.
duet, and that required that they play with a click track, and then we paired those videos together. What have you found to be useful for doing something like that, putting together a virtual ensemble?
Sure. Well, there is just the raw learning curve of, finding the software that you like. So, I'm a Mac user, so it was easy enough to decide to use iMovie. But, again, not everyone has a Mac, so you have to find a program that's like comparable enough, and you have to
Hmm.
play with that program yourself too. So it's like you're always kind of taking on two learning curves in some sense.
Hmm.
So I like DaVinci for that. That's
Hmm.
a great resource for it, and I think it's important because there's I say this often, but it's like this year is really about making lemonade. So you have this sort of situation, you've been given lemons and you want to do something with it,
Hmm.
and I my inner teacher wants to make sure that my kids are really musically literate and things like that as well. But you know, just the what I might have allocated for classroom time for sight reading or the things like that, maybe it's now more about how do we use editing software? How do you record
Hmm.
stuff? How do you set a click track? And how do you slate your videos so that when you edit it, you can streamline your process? And I think it's great because you know we're 21st century musicians, so there's this real need, and increasingly so for my students. I feel that as they're if I'm trying to prepare them for a musical career, you know the people that are doing it well can do these like self duets or self, I'm thinking of Jacob Collier right now just doing like all those little like a cappella videos where there's just
Hmm.
five of him, and that's
Hmm.
a really engaging content. And my gosh, you can, I mean, the dude's a genius, but you understand though, it's a great way to be creative. And then you can either do it with yourself or you can, I'm sure, Steve, that you must feel the same way too with your quartet members in some
Yeah,
sense as well, because you can't always be there to rehearse because you guys are in Rochester and Michigan, Buffalo, and it's
yeah,
um,
or Minnesota. Yeah,
Minnesota. Forgive me. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, there's this real need to be able to collaborate remotely, and how does one do that? You know, how are you recording with a metronome? Are you doing a video? Like, there's lots of interesting, very creative uh, ways of approaching this that I don't think are taking away from your musicianship. I think they're enhancing. So it's like I'm kind of steering the ship a little bit away from music literacy in some sense, but I'm kind of
Mhm.
giving these other skill sets that I think are really invaluable in the long run. So I think that's
Absolutely.
how I kind of
Yeah.
look at
Yeah.
it. And
That's, I'm just thinking, I was looking at my bookshelf here and recalling that, Bream was way ahead of the curve on this. He did the famous video of the Boccherini Fandango as a duo arrangement, and had himself on the side by sides. If you haven't seen that video, look it up. I'm sure someone has posted it on online somewhere, or you can buy the DVD. I think it's on his Guitarra um,
yeah,
documentary. But uh, yeah, the skill sets that we have. So let's just to use another buzzword. It's something that we need to have more of a portfolio of skills as musicians these days. It's um, gone are the days when a musician would solely be an artist of their craft at their instrument, and that's all. There are very few examples of that anymore. Almost all of us have some kind of tech skills that allow us to do at least a scratch recording of some sort to piece together and share. And though I have not used it uh, in the pandemic times, it's often helpful to have some kind of recording to share and send back and forth. Just that's stuff that's been done since we were using cassettes, and that kind of collaboration is now it's just a little bit more streamlined and faster for us to do. But I think also it's opening up new uh, avenues for students to consider for their careers. We have um, a digital and new media degree here at the University of Louisville, and students are looking into that as ways to have a career in music that falls outside of what we may traditionally look at as a performance degree. Um, and while that doesn't have direct bearing on our discussion for class guitar, I think this the skills that are there are things that class guitar teachers, well, classroom educators kind of need now. We're
yeah,
seeing that in basically all of our subjects. There are some kinds of resources that are just essentially requirements of the field these days. For me, I certainly iMovie is something that I have used for that. Um, we've all probably used different platforms, from Zoom to Microsoft Teams to Google Classroom and so forth, to make those things happen. I think the more that we can get the experience of education in an online format to be immersive, the better it is. And I think that is
yeah,
something that's really exciting to to see what's developing these days, where students can have that classroom experience, but in an online setting. Where I know when so often when I go to visit a high school classroom, one of the greatest things, that something that I absolutely love about visiting those classes, is the energy that's in the room of so many students together, excited about the guitar and playing to one another across the classroom to see, who can play that slur lick from Tango in Sky faster, um, and just living off of that creative energy that's in the room, and that needs to happen now on in an online format.
for sure. I definitely feel I'm definitely kind of tasking myself with that responsibility of kind of creating that culture. When I did the Austin Guitar Teacher Summit, Teacher Training Summit, they were really kind of really heavy on promoting just like, if someone performed or if someone said something in the chat, like to use like, little asterisks or emojis or something like that, just that people knew that because there's this feeling of putting yourself out there and not really knowing how it's being perceived or received.
Right.
So that's definitely what it's been like in my class, where when we, I have to remember that I'm you know it's easy to forget, but I remember like when I was studying with you, for example, I remember just being so excited to play in studio class. Like that was
Mhm.
like every single week I wanted to play, and that was true in my undergrad as well. That I always was just anxious to do that, and I have to remember that my students probably are anxious to do that too, and it is a privilege to get to play for each other. So it's about allowing those opportunities virtually, and then obviously we can't have this cacophony of lagging claps and stuff like that, or but we can still we can do this and be on mute,
Mhm.
or we can still have
Mhm.
emojis or this in the chat or whatever it is, and just so we're feeling that sense of community is really important. And in some sense I do feel like the kids are more engaged a little bit more. I think in terms of um, giving etudes to my students, I feel like I have more kids on the same page now more than ever, which is really,
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
wonderful.
Mhm.
Where there's usually, there's always going to be, and I imagine this is true for other disciplines as well. Like there's not everyone's going to be violin chair number one. I mean, there's always going to be people that just like participating in it. But I'm feeling that with the solos now these days, which is really nice with them and with etudes as well.
Yeah.
That most kids are on the same level and they're all contributing a lot to it. And I know that whenever we're back in person, when you have someone that has those more refined solo skills, it's just going to make the ensemble even better as well. So
Right. Exactly. Exactly. This is something that I kind of think about the cross pollination that we have from our various endeavors in online format. It can be such a fertile environment for us to find inspiration or resources from other places. And, we can always go there for the collective group think of social media or whatever that might be. Um, but to your point about how things are going or perceiving that, I do want to recognize again, just to say to our attendees here on Zoom and whoever may be watching in chat, if there are any questions about class guitar education, if you have any questions that get down to the more nuts and bolts detail of how to lead a guitar class or how to start a class guitar program, we'd be happy to discuss that. Also, resources that we use that we've found between us, and I'd be happy to share that and open that discussion. So just forward those discussions there or those questions there in the chat feature. And we have others on the call who can let us know about any questions that are coming up online.
sure, and I can maybe just give you my perspective on that so far. So um, I've been recording these YouTube videos, these tutorial videos, and I've been kind of starting off class with maybe a 10-minute video or so. The kids all watch. It's just a screen share for that. They play along with it. And depending on the classroom size, we'll either go into breakout rooms and they'll play for each other.
Hmm.
Because it is nice to be, especially when you're testing something out, it's nice to be in a smaller, if you're in a larger group, it's easy to shy away
Right.
from it. But if there's only 3 or 4 people, you can all kind of keep the camera on and be there for each other. So I'm finding that the small breakout rooms are very helpful. So we do have that going on. I have been using etudes.co for I'll do a screen share of that, and we'll look up and like one of the Segreras,
Hmm.
Escuela de Aparte Guitarra, one of those early lessons, and we'll
Hmm.
sight read through that as a screen share. Again, I can't hear everybody do it, but again, depending on the classroom size, I can maybe allocate some time to have someone run through it. But at least they're getting the process, and it's
Right.
we are allowing for that. And similarly with the other kind of thread we talked about here was this virtual guitar orchestra. So right now, my studio is preparing for the Kentucky All State Guitar Orchestra. So we're um, we're working on our piece by Mozart right now, and we're doing breakout rooms essentially with it. Just
Hmm.
just starting off class and setting a set number of measures, and then I'll kind of just move myself in and out of different breakout rooms, and just like if I need to go over pre-reading or go over rhythm or articulation, I'll drop myself there, and then I'll leave them be, and let them kind of um, own that information themselves really,
Right.
and kind of advocate for each other within the group and make sure that they're all on the same page. So um, it's a work in process. I like what I've seen so far. I'm sure I'm going to find
Hmm.
other approaches for it, but that kind of tutorial video. And then I guess just the other thing too is, of course, I'll set a weekly assignment based on however many tutorial videos that we get through for the week. And then I send, much like what you would do, where a student would post something, you'd put a timestamp and a comment in. I do have options with that with software like Collabora that my
Hmm.
school does use. I've been using Google Classroom pretty exclusively with it, and for me, it's been I watch their video and I'll just send a video back, and then they can
Right.
reference that at any point. And I think
Right.
it's, again, in this day and age where everything feels like ones and zeros and we're not really connected, I think to have a face saying, "Hey, Steven,
Yeah.
you did
Yeah.
so great on this,
Yeah. Right.
but
Right.
let's look at this." And I
Yeah.
think that, um, insofar as they watch it,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think it's helpful for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely, and that demonstration is just so valuable to have that versus the long lines of text that may be in a typical response
Yes.
that we have. I think too about the fact that we are now able to utilize guest artists more easily to the extent that we have the budget and the time and everyone's schedule for it. Um, I was able over the summer to participate in two festivals at the same time, and through overall in well, four festivals overall throughout the summer, and some of them were happening concurrently, and that would have been impossible in a standard in-person setting. Um, and then also that is true in the classroom. More quickly able to commute into a classroom if it's meeting online and help with students like you're talking about in breakout rooms and discuss things like sectionals for ensembles or solo parts that students are working on.
And there's been this real great, at least to my eyes and ears, there's been this wonderful, at least in the art side of things, this really great kind of cultural generosity in some sense. I've been amazed that like the two, I participated in the Guitar Foundation America virtual convention and then the Austin Teacher Training Summit, and they were
Hmm.
both free. They were both like
Hmm.
again, it
Hmm.
was just
Hmm.
awesome that they were providing that. They were looking at this time. They really wanted to be responsive to it. And I think that's something that we're also doing at the Louisville Guitar Society is we're trying to we have our free concert with TY on Saturday, and again the at the heart of it is just building community and having a place for us to kind of connect because we realize the lack. I think artists are just naturally sensitive people, so we can feel that absence, and I think we are creating it. We're filling it up, in a really beautiful way.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. And I've just been overwhelmed by what we've seen in those endeavors and the free content that's available online for us during these times. It makes it that much easier to get through such a difficult time when so much of our craft and our art is about that human connection.
Yeah.
Um, so to kind of pivot completely off that topic a bit, I guess, at least in the sense of online resources, I wanted to have a little discussion about some things that would be like essential bookshelf items, things that you would want to have on your bookshelf as a class guitar teacher. And this isn't necessarily for means of specific promotion of any one particular person's method or one
Mm.
particular book, but just to kind of get that discussion started and offer and share what we use or what we found to be helpful, even if it's just generically saying some kind of our class guitar method.
Sure. And I don't mind, I think we all have our opinions about it. And if you don't have one, it's worth trying one on and seeing
Hmm.
what you think with it.
Hmm.
So I, I've had a lot of success with kind of doing a hybrid between a classic guitar. So I use the first book for myself as the teacher,
Hmm.
the blue book, and that's sort of what I'm keeping track of movement forms and things like that and understanding, um, how to teach those maybe the most effective way.
Hmm.
And then I really do like, what the students see is learning the classic guitar part two, the green book,
Hmm.
that that I just really like the sequence of it. I think there's it's really thorough, and it kind of it it repeats material so much that if the student has to play a movement form one more time, they're about to explode before they're doing it, which I really like. And then I've kind of found where different moments, either in the Royal Conservatory curriculum, the bridges, the preparatory through level 8 books, and
Right.
kind of found where do the movement forms intersect with Aaron Shear. And then also looking again, we kind of mentioned that the biggest thing that I could offer someone joining the music education field, especially that's coming from a guitar background, is I really love the Austin guitar curriculum because it's ensemble based. It starts off rote based. So there's kind of a Suzuki
Hmm.
approach to it as well too, in that
Hmm.
sense. And
Hmm.
I also love kind of piggybacking off the Aaron Shear materials. Alan Hirsch, who composed a lot of the pieces in Aaron Shear, he has a website called guitarensembles.com, and he
Hmm.
has just some amazing graded ensembles, and he has it for extra. Now this, obviously we're not back in the classroom yet, but there's a lot of great arrangements that include requinto and contrabass, and I have kids that just like light up at the chance to kind of play these novelty instruments in a way.
Right.
So
Right.
a kind of a hybrid of all of those, and of course little other ancillary, music theory things or other kind of supplementary books I really love. But having the Royal Conservatory, having Aaron Shear's um, 1 and 2. Actually, the third book, the Red Book, is really wonderful about performance development. And we were talking about culture
Hmm.
earlier. I will often just read a passage about developmental performances versus expressive performance, and letting kids
Right.
um, creating the culture where they can, you're not giving a concert right now. You're developing your performance. What are the procedures? Sometimes we read Aaron Shear's message and we think it's almost too basic sometimes, but it's what we have,
Hmm.
and we need it. It's probably the best materials that are out there.
Yeah,
So
I can't, yeah, I can't say enough about that particular method, and I know I certainly adopt much of those foundations in my own teaching. And whether I'm using that method in terms of handing the student book two and going through the various exercises, uh, the teaching is definitely there. And I think it's also, if anyone is familiar with the Aaron Shearer method but has not looked at the newer editions, it's worth checking out what uh, uh, Thomas Kikta and Alan Hirsch have added to that. With they have videos and CD that's available, and there's online content that kind of create a living document out of the thing. I think that's one of the great things about online content is we can update that and have a new publication, so to speak, out in a matter of minutes, from the notice that there's some supplement or correction or addendum that needs to be made.
mhm.
I think that's really
And
helpful.
for sure, because the first book from I think it was published in 1990 or something like that. It's a lot to read. You have to
Hmm.
come at it, because when I was in your pedagogy class, I remember going through these and reading it, but it's something that I've come back to many times, and then I'm a little bit more gobsmacked each time that I come back to it, because I really am amazed by the precision of the language. But to your point, Aaron's language is beautiful, but sometimes it's just nice to have a video of seeing it
Absolutely.
happen.
Yeah, we came from like a tradition where we have illustrations. You can go all the way back to Juan Carlos Amat and see illustrations, with like wood block carvings and stamped. That I just don't think that illustrations can lend even a fraction of what a real photo can do. And then say a high quality photo, and then a video that's even better. So if we're not doing that now, then I think that we're really missing a great opportunity to share with students something from the method. But I of course can say that, but then reference again my attempt to make a video on how to change your guitar strings.
Yes. And well,
uh,
and besides that, Steve, it's always just the bigs, right? We love our Giulianis, we love our Segovia scales. Some of that is in the Royal Conservatory materials. It's kind of embedded
Absolutely.
in its own kind of way. But they work.
Yeah.
they, they
I
do.
did want to mention a couple things that came to mind that would be on my bookshelf,
Yeah,
and things
please.
that I if this is more for those of you who are out there who may well, I guess it's not solely, but especially those who came from a performance background, but then are teaching guitar. I would look up this book, Bill Swick's Teaching Beginning Guitar Class. Bill Swick is a known familiar name in the guitar community.
Yeah, Grammy
Has led
Award, Grammy Teaching Award, something
Grammy
like that.
Teaching Award, has taught at the Las Vegas Academy for many years. I've observed his classroom, and he definitely shares some valuable information here, stuff that can really get you thinking uh, about how you're going to set up your classroom and model that classroom, and some things that may kind of escape your notice especially as a beginning teacher. So I would definitely recommend that book. And then I had a couple of books that are perhaps lesser known, at least to our U.S. audiences, and some things that I just think are really fantastic. And I would say, especially my suggestion here would be what they offer to us as guitar educators, um, from a presenting the material model, as far as the linear progression that we may make, and a very progressive approach to the material. But so one of them for material and content would be this book, Dietrich Kreidler's Guitar Method, that's published by Shaw. That has some really great stuff in there. It includes some ensemble playing along the way too. Um, Fantastic approach to thumb technique and string crossing, and so forth. And at least, even if you don't agree entirely with any of the particular content and approach of this, the material itself is very good in the way it's presented. And along those lines, another one is Introducing the Guitar by Hubert Keppel. That's a fantastic book, especially for young students. I really love that. And then I was recently introduced to this book. At first, it's called First Class Guitar by Tatiana Stachek. And this was introduced to me by the Kopinski duo when I was
Oh,
teaching with them in Poland. And one of the, I was just amazed by how musical this is for young students, and it includes little duets, and it's very much like uh, uh, scale based and key based, similar to what you might be accustomed to with, say, like the Carcassi method, in terms of like introducing new keys and then providing material in that very musical collection of things there. So those are just some things I thought we may not be aware of, that are a little bit less common, that have been some favorites for me anyway.
yeah, very cool. I'm not familiar with the book from Poland, or the Keidler book. I'll have to check those out.
Yeah, they're nice. I think the Dieter Kreidler is, it's available in English as well, and I think that's a little easier to get your hands on, possibly, than the Stachek, but definitely worth investigating. Um, yeah, and so we're kind of approaching the end of our time here. I just thought I would say, again, to everyone, if you have any questions that you want to get out there, feel free to do so. I'm happy to follow up after.
We
Um,
have a conversation going tomorrow, right? At 10 a.m. again. So if anything, if
that's
the
right.
tea kind of steeps for a while and you think of something, we'd be happy to talk about it tomorrow as well.
Exactly.
Well, yeah,
Well,
you have a technique workshop to get ready
I have a
for.
technique
So,
workshop coming up. Yep, and today we will go over mostly the foundations of setting up good technique for right and left hand, and posture. And then tomorrow we'll delve a little bit deeper into some exercises, some formative exercises and warm-ups. So,
well, we'll let you get your nails filed if you need
right.
to, and we'll see you in like a couple minutes then, Stephen. I had so
Hey,
much fun chatting with you.
yeah, great. Thanks for it, Mike. It's great.
All right, I'll catch you in a little bit.
opinions on technique formation, but not solely my own. Of course, things that I've adopted and adapted and learned over the years from uh, many much greater guitarists than myself. So I hope that you'll get something beneficial out of them from today. Uh, let's see. Yeah, I'm ready to go live whenever you guys are there on the session. Those who are running the show for us here. All right, look at that. Here we are. Okay, so uh, again, thanks to everyone who's there in the studio, in the virtual studio, making all of this happen. I have had virtually zero input on making the slides you're seeing here as part of this webinar happen, other than putting the slides together and the content. So those who are working their magic, I am just in awe of what's happening right now. But anyway, here we are. Guitar technique made easy. Just wanted to share with you a little bit of the idea about these slides. As you're going to see here, there's a little bit of content that's being shared there. I don't know if this black mark on the side is on everyone else's screen, but hopefully the content itself is enough that you'll get what you need out of it. So these things that I'm going to share today are pretty much just insights that I thought would be, well, let's say essential elements to share in setting up basic guitar technique, mostly for the beginning students and for your initial lessons. But I think these kinds of things, even for an advanced student, it's always valuable to kind of investigate and look back and see if there isn't in fact something that you may want to revisit or reshape in your own technique. So to that end, I'll just kind of jump right in here and say, you know, we always want to look at the essential ingredients in setting up our guitar technique from the start. And some of that has to do with the guitar itself. And choosing the right size instrument for our students is incredibly important. I just think back to, you know, my own mother explaining to me why she began and quit guitar, and it was her guitar that I later found as a kid that just fascinated me and made me want to begin. And that instrument was far too big, a full-size instrument for a little kid. The strings were horribly high. You know, it was a steel string instrument. It hurt just to push the strings down. And I would imagine it would make anyone want to run from the instrument. So if we can just go back to the previous slide, a couple of things on there I wanted to make sure to mention that were there. When we choose a guitar size, we want to take into account the student's body size and proportions. And then we also need to think about the chair height and its slope. So which way the chair's seat may slope, forward or back. It makes a big difference. And this is something that anyone who might be practicing in a practice room at a music school where they've so carefully put together a very nice room, but then they have chairs that slope back toward the back of the chair, and we're constantly struggling against that. That can really do some damage to our lower back. Sitting position, the guitar positioning, our right and left hand positions, and body alignment, and then the music stand height and distance, and even its placement are all things that we'll take into account. So let's advance to the next slide, and I'll show you again these charts here that we have. So basically, this is a chart that's included in a book I mentioned, Hubert Keppel's Introducing the Guitar. It's a fantastic book. I would recommend getting it. It's a great read in and of itself. But in this chart, it's a chart that's provided by the European Guitar Teachers Association to kind of connect body height and roughly the age of the student to the scale length. This is, so 10 centimeters is approximately 4 inches is the conversion you can do there. Another way that you can do this, it just roughly works if you're dealing with scale length and trying to find that for the student. If you take the elbow to the knuckles of the arm of the student, that is a good, just kind of approximate guess at the scale length they should have, would be to place the elbow at the 12th fret and then find where the knuckles reach. Now, if I did that, you can probably already see I would be playing like an instrument of the size of like 660 or 670 or something like that. But certainly playing a smaller instrument than what that distance means is going to be, say, less challenging to my technique than it would be if I went the other way. So what we're trying to avoid, first of all, is to make sure that we don't put an instrument in a student's hands that's far too big for her. That would be disastrous to setting up the basics of right and, well, especially left hand technique. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide then. Here is the chair, mostly the sitting position here. I just mostly wanted to talk about the chair itself. You want to find a chair that is about 18 inches off the ground and I want to say that is specifically for a grown student. So this would be someone who has advanced beyond their years of growing, and they're, probably say 5'5" and taller. That generally that height would work. So 5 feet 5 inches. I don't know what that is in metric. Then no slope toward the back of the seat, right? Thighs generally parallel to the floor, maybe a subtle slope from the hip to the knees. I mentioned here 90-degree angle to 100-degree angle between the back and the legs. I don't know, maybe I can switch my video here real quick, and I'll go over to my other chair there and I can show you real quick what I mean by that. There we go. So there's my studio, and I'll show you just here briefly. You can see there next to the slides. What I mean by this is this slope. If I am sitting in my chair, I want that the core and maybe the center line of my sides to my legs to be about 90 degrees. If I were to lean back, that would increase, but that is not what I'm saying as far as that angle. It would be if you're in a seat where your legs slope downward slightly, that would be fine. We of course always want to keep our back more or less balanced forward to back like this. Okay. All right. So going on to the next slide. Here we have some principles of good posture. We want to minimize tension and maximize our range of motion. We should be balanced and sitting upright, left to right. The photo you see here is a young Pepe Romero from his fantastic guitar method, La Guitarra. Again, if you don't have that book, you should definitely look into it. A couple things going on here with the young Pepe Romero. He's, of course, leaning left, looking at his left hand, as we all do. He's got a great deal of torsion going on, where he's twisting his upper body in leaning and looking left. And his shoulder, his right shoulder, is tilting forward and coming forward to play. All of those things that obviously he mastered and corrected in his overall technique and in his technical wizardry that we see now. So the young student that we see here is presenting, and Pepe is presenting some very typical technical behaviors that we have as guitarists, being so centered and concentrated on our left hand. In the videos that follow, I'll kind of show some things that we want to do to set up that basic posture. So let's go on to the next slide here. Bone stacking is a big thing, what we want to do in our setup. So as you see here in the skeleton sitting on the bench, there is some semblance of bone stacking going on in our spine. You want to make sure that you're sitting on your tail, on your sits bones, let's say, And this posture of sitting like this is something that we often tend to neglect. It's very common to see students, and really all of us, if you just imagine yourself maybe, sitting in the waiting room at the DMV to get your license renewed or something like that, you might start to slouch as you sit there longer and longer. And we begin to then sit not really on our bottom, but we sit kind of leaning back. And that's a really bad habit to develop. We want to elongate our spine. I say it's kind of weeble wobble to balance left, right, and forward to back. So I will often have students just kind of gently lean forward. This is before the guitar is even in the student's hands. Gently lean forward and feel that balance and gravity begin to take them toward that forward momentum, and then lean back and feel gravity begin to pull them back into the chair, and then that resistance that the body feels as we struggle against that. And it's very interesting to feel the muscles that are involved in that resistance, and then find finally where that center line is and that balance is forward to back. And then the same thing for left to right, to lean gently left and to feel that weight begin to distribute toward the left side body, and then how the right side counteracts that, and then the same for the right side. This is all good for us to find that center line. And then we also want our feet to be stacked well. And this is where we can really see bone stacking working for us to find that balance. If our feet are approximately hip width apart and receiving gentle weight is what we want. So the motion you can kind of make as you sit in your chair is begin to make that motion like you will stand up, and then relax it back down a bit. That will get a lot of this happening for you. Okay, let's go on to the next slide now. So here I show some postures, the X, Y axis, the head, the core, and the shoulder alignment that we're looking at here. I'm using a guitar support there, so this can be slightly different for those who are using a footstool. One thing I will say about this photo that I would redo is that there is not good bone stacking happening in my right leg, and I know that because I'm looking at my right knee there, and I can tell that I've placed my foot more toward the chair. That's something that we all know as we play. We adjust our feet, our position slightly. In an ideal setting, I would start off with my ankles directly below my knees, so that my leg was creating, again, just kind of mirroring what my back to my legs were doing, a 90 to 100 degree angle. The same with my legs. I prefer not to have my legs at an acute angle, or in other words, my feet underneath the chair. For one thing, that is more likely to cut off circulation there. For another, it's also more likely that it will encourage that uneven distribution of my weight to one direction or another. We want to maintain those principles of good posture presented before. And then you want to accommodate the guitar with right foot adjustments. So I will just show a little bit of what I mean by that. And I'll just switch to my other webcam just briefly there for this as well. So one thing that often happens in our setup is that we begin to hold the instrument, and we may set up, and I'll demonstrate this without my guitar support, but with my footstool. We might set up and we sit in the chair, and this may be the way we would typically sit. And then once we put our foot up on the footstool, we put the guitar there, and there's our right leg remaining where it was previously, and it's putting the guitar toward my left side. And you may notice in this photo, I prefer, if possible, to have the center line of the sound hole approximately there in the center line of my body. In some cases, it's nice even to put it a little more toward the right. I'm often envious of those who are able to find a nice way to do that. And some have found, even you might have seen Andrew Zone place his guitar almost on his right leg, or Scott Tennant resting the guitar on his right leg. And that gives a really nice purchase to the instrument for the left hand. So what I often recommend for students who are playing in a traditional way with the footstool is to be mindful of where they're placing that right foot. And if we place that right foot a little more than hip width apart, and now it's out at a greater angle from our hip. That provides more space for the guitar to rest in our lap, and then leaning the guitar back into us, then you see that the guitar has become more in line with that center line of the sound hole for where I'm resting it now, as opposed to this, where it's now off to the left. And what usually happens when this is the case is we make that adjustment by leaning left. And now I have tension that is going to constantly reside there in my lower back and in my right side body. It also will then encourage me to begin tilting my body or adding torsion to my body this way. And that tension that's there will creep into other parts of my body. Okay, let's go on to the next slide now. So here's a good performance position that's shown. This is again from Hubert Keppel's Introducing the Guitar. We have 4 points of contact, not including what the left hand fingers and thumb may be doing. But aside from that, the guitar leans into the chest. There's, of course, the right forearm, the left upper thigh, and then the right upper thigh. Notice that there's nice mirroring of the arms and hands. That what is the basic posture for the right hand is kind of mirrored in an inverse for the left hand. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the coming slides. Okay, next one. Here you see some triangles we're looking for. This is the classic image you've seen probably in so many other methods. There are multiple triangles we can look at in our setup for guitar playing. One of them here is that when I mention here the guitar leans into the body, I look for this slope of the guitar. There are a number of things that are very beneficial about this. One is that there you can see in the little space between my belly and the back of the instrument is that my body is not damping the back of that instrument from resonating. I have that contact point at the upper bout of the guitar that's leaning against my chest, but it's along a side of the guitar that's braced, and it vibrates very little anyway. So that allows the instrument itself to resonate a little more fully. It also gives me the benefit of having a better view of my right hand, the strings going across, and then the neck, of course. So if you're not doing that, I would recommend definitely get that as part of your setup. There are different schools of thought, I would assume, because many people will play with a very upright and straight instrument. I find another thing that you're missing in doing so is you're not able to fully utilize gravity to your advantage in the right and left hands. Meaning that in this view, you can see my right hand there on the strings. I can use a portion of the force of gravity that is allowing me to press into the strings to get greater projection with less energy. It also allows me to make bar chords or even simply fretting single notes with a little bit of use of the weight of my arm better than I would be able to if the instrument was straight up and down. Okay, next slide. Here's another triangle we're kind of looking at, that center line I talked about that you saw on the XY axis there, and then also basically the neck angle. And you see here the eye level of Hubert Keppel there going to what looks like approximately the 5th string tuning peg. That's about where I usually tend to put mine. It does look here like possibly he's hunching down in his chair just a little bit. So that might be when he sits upright a little bit more toward like the 4th string tuner or something like that. But somewhere in that range is where we're generally looking. And next slide. And then here's another one that we're looking at. There is a triangle that you can see if you kind of imagine here. This is from Aaron Shearer's Learning the Classic Guitar. There is the performer. Common thing to suggest sometimes to free up the right leg would be to place the chair at an angle. Now, if you're looking at this, you might notice that this in this bird's eye view, we see that a couple of things about the performer that I would just kind of make slight adjustments to this myself. One is that I don't necessarily put my right foot directly in front of my head. Sorry, my left foot. My left foot, I usually have that off to the side a little bit more than what's shown here. More or less, if I'm sitting in a chair squared up and facing forward, that left foot is in front of the left leg of the chair. Another thing is that it might seem that the performer's head is over the instrument, which would suggest that the neck is craning out and looking over. Now, often we have to make some kind of adjustment like that to see certain things on the instrument if we need to for a difficult shift. But I tend to try to keep my head more stacked over my neck. But the biggest thing here from this to illustrate is the angle of the guitar out. That if you imagine the upper side of this frame being a reference point, the headstock is closer to that top part of the frame than the bridge is. Or in other words, if there were an audience in this image, there would be a closer proximity of the headstock to the audience than the bridge of the instrument. That angle is really important. It makes it easier for the right arm to get over the instrument. It decreases that tendency to want to have right to left torsion. And it also makes a more comfortable angle for the left hand, I believe. So let's look at the next slide. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the hands and their optimal position in motion. One thing that you'll hear from Shearer again and again, these illustrations, of course, come from his learning the classic guitar. There's a range of motion. Every joint has a particular range of motion. In our owls, we cannot swivel our head all the way around. And also, we can't do that with any of us wrists, elbows, or shoulders. So we have two motions, extension and flexion, flexing and extending. And each of those joints has a particular range, and we want to stay basically in that mid range. So I'll refer to things like our neutral position or default position, meaning the way the hand is in its natural state as at a relaxed state. And then we will have that is where we use a little bit of energy just to hold our hands in position. So let's go on to the next slide. Here we see an optimal position of weight versus relaxation, kind of showing you that concept there, illustration you might recognize.